Let's begin with the prayer then. Om Sahana Vavatu Sahano Bhunaktu Sahavidyam Karavavahai Tejasvinavadhitamastu ma vidvishavahai. Om Shanti Shanti Shantihi. Gurur Brahma Gurur Vishnu Gurur Devo Maheshwaraha Gurureva Param Brahma Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. So welcome to our first teacher satsang ever at Chinmaya Chitrakoot. This is the first time I'm having a session here at this center, 4 years after being here. So it's wonderful to be here. Hari Om to all our friends, teachers at Saket who are tuning into the live stream from there. Pranams to all of you as well. Today we begin with As I Think, collection of essays by Pujya Gurudev on nation building. What did he see as the need of the hour? How did he think Hinduism had to be explained? And what was the actual method to get there? Not just an intellectual work on someone should do this, someone should do that, things can be like this. He actually put things to implementation, and we see the magic of that. Now again, the reason why this is our text this year is, this is Pujya Gurudev's 108th birth year. Very significant milestone. So for that, let's get a deeper understanding of what his vision is, and that way we all grow together as sevaks, and our teaching becomes that much more rooted in Pujya Gurudev's grand vision. Starting off then, let's look at this first essay. I'll draw two things here. Circle here, and a larger circle around. Now, I'll provide you a picture of this later. No need to write it down. So his statement at the very get-go, at the very beginning of this text, is an interesting one. He says, the intelligentsia, his vocabulary was quite high, so words like intelligentsia are there, have learnt to ignore their culture and their religion as redundant and unnecessary. This is opening salvo in the very text. Intelligentsia have learnt to ignore their culture and religion as redundant and unnecessary. Let's just dissect this one line here. Intelligentsia. By that he means the so-called educated people of the land. Because education is seen as what? That which leads to progress, that which leads to prosperity. So under that British system of education that was implemented across Bharata in the 1800s, did it lead to monetary progress? Not for Indian people. Did it lead to any kind of cultural pride? Not for Indian people. It helped the British Empire, did nothing for the people, the natives whom they were ruling over, but, like Lord Macaulay said in his famous Minute on Education, he wants to build a generation of Indians who are brown and looking like Indians on the outside, but for all intents and purposes, they're British subjects on the inside. He was very open about that being the goal of education in the country. So here, it's very apt that Gurudev has said, intelligentsia have learnt to ignore their culture. That this is not just something that happens by happenstance. In no civilization do they just happen to lose out on their culture, happen to have some kind of revulsion towards it. They have to have that taught to them. That's what's happened by the 1950s when Gurudev is talking about this. So to ignore their culture and religion as redundant and unnecessary. Meaning, why is there redundancy in any situation? Redundancy occurs when I have something already with me, and there's no need to have this again. If my goal of life is to be happy, I get that through education, I get that through monetary means, these are all the ways I get it, why the heck do I need religion then? And he'll go further now to talk about what those reasons are that Hindus at that time and even now had that revulsion to their own religion. So it's the first thing that he points to here. He says, as Hindus, we live our religion by proxy. What is a proxy? If a boss is in a meeting, they can't make the meeting, they send some subordinate there. The subordinate then has the power to make decisions as if the boss were there themselves. Right? That's proxy, where they have that authority. Where do you see this in Hinduism then? When he says Hindus are living by proxy, I want your opinions, where do you see this? What is he getting at?
They make decisions on what they can do and what they can't do. They interpret it.
Interpret it their own way. There's no one really guiding. One of the instances, how often do you find that someone living in this country will give dakshina to a priest in India and say, complete this certain karma on my behalf? Where for one example I'll give you that I saw. After someone loses a family member, some traditions, they do something called a masika puja every single month, where they honor that person and they offer something. Every single month there's a karma that's done. That the tradition is that the person is involved in that when they've lost someone. What do we see some people doing nowadays? They outsource that to someone, priest in India, they do that. They'll wake up at a certain time, do namaskar there, and that's it, and then they go about their day. Convenience. And we give excuses as to why we have to do things that way. That's living religion by proxy. Or, even more debilitating, is when we say, okay, this scriptural knowledge, because it's easy to point to the Abrahamic religions, their scripture is that one Bible, one Quran, one Torah. That's the main crux of all their teachings. We have to go through so many texts. So we say, let the learning be up to only some people, let them worry about that. Our Hinduism is different. They're the proxy for the learning stuff. We won't learn anything about the culture, but we're Hindu in name only. That leads to issues later on. So Hinduism by proxy, how can we summarize that then? If we were to say what's an example of that, what should I write down there? This has got to come from you all. So outsourced practices then? Because my goal in this workshop is, on the periphery is where I'm writing Gurudev's words. But that has to mean something to us. So in purple in this middle circle here, that's where I'm writing our examples. What are we connecting that with? This is the part that Gurudev gives us. This is the important part that makes sense to us. That's what I want us to get to. Yes, I love, that's what I was, yes. That you please put values into my kid and take care of him. I'm too busy to do that. But in Balvihar, you guys please do it. Please parent my kids the right way. Proxy, I love that. So that's one example that we see.
But Hariti, although many people also believe that in our religion there is no rule or anything set strictly, and we can really make use of having a proxy.
We come to that in our third point, we come to that. That's a very good point. We'll bring it up then. So that's the second point, first point he makes. Second one, when they see our culture as unnecessary, he says Hindus see their religion as superstitious. Why is this the case, do you think? What are examples you can give of why, or when do you see this, of Hindus thinking their religion is superstitious?
Lots of religious rituals are done without understanding the meaning.
So elaborate rituals at that too. And they're long as well, right? That's what really gets to people. So, rituals without knowing the meaning.
It's not a fear factor when some yogi babas say.
Science and religion are opposed to each other. This whole idea of science and religion being opposed to each other was an Abrahamic necessity. When Copernicus said that the earth is not the center of the world, the universe, the sun is at the middle and we go around that sun, was he persecuted? The church persecuted him severely for that. When Galileo came up with his discoveries, was he applauded for it? He was persecuted. When Newton introduced meaning his time period, came up with the theory of gravity, was he applauded for it? Persecuted by the church. Persecuted a lot. Because the teachings of those religions were in complete conflict with what logical science was. Therefore, to survive, they felt they had to persecute these scientists, which is why science had to be separate from the purview, from the oppression of religion, to have any relevance for the people. Now you look at Sanatana Dharma then. Science is ingrained in every single Shastra that we have. I was just telling in the first session today, talking about different texts, in Srimad Bhagavatam, 3rd canto of this text, there's an entire section solely on embryonic development. From the time of conception until that baby is born, how does the fetus develop week by week is clearly given. So seeing this, I was astounded. Like, this is so detailed. I have a friend of mine who's an OBGYN. So I showed her this, and I said, does this check out with what you've learned? So she gave me 2 awesome insights. One was, yes, of course it checks out. This is brilliant. Number 2 is, what's given in our textbooks, in our medical books, in our practices, we only caught up to what this says about 20 or 30 years ago. Until then, child mortality was a significant issue. You look at the ancient Hindu civilization, though, child mortality was almost unheard of at that time. Because of the safe medical practices and precautions that they took for the mothers and the children, child mortality was not an issue. So, not knowing the meanings of things, not knowing it, we say things are superstitious, they have meanings behind them. You look at everyday examples now. When an Indian has to buy a house, what is something that even the real estate agents know now to look out for? Vastu. If we don't understand Vastu, say I'm a person that's a lay person, I don't understand Vastu at all. I don't have any knowledge of it. I go by it. I don't understand it fully. I'd like to someday. I go and try to buy a house, my first home. I find that it's the perfect house, perfect price and everything. Then my mom comes around and my mother-in-law comes around and says, this door is not east facing, this is not like this, that's not like this, don't buy the house. I would freak out at that moment then, wouldn't I? It's in a good school district, front car garage, separated so that no one can park in my spot. All of these things are there. Not according to some Vastu that's ancient, so all of a sudden I have to give up the house. What is this nonsense? When that mindset is taken, not understanding what the science behind that Vastu Shastra is, superstition is what I label it as. That's how we fall. Now, this is the point that Ajnama was making here. 3rd one, people strictly obey and live only the non-essential externalities. So living, my handwriting is good on paper when I can write like this. When writing here, I write like I have a broken wrist. So please don't think that I'm that messy. I don't know how to write on a board. I could never become a teacher, but here I am now. What to do? Living the non-essential externalities. Let me explain what this means then, and we'll take examples. These things are not essential for the religion. There are fun parts that are add-ons, and they are an integral part in some way, but we lose ourselves in these, and when we do these things, we say that, oh, feel-good factor of, I'm doing it right. What are some examples you can think of? Festivals, then. One thing that comes to mind for me, it is with the festivals. And I ding the college kids for this when they're presidents and secretaries of their student organizations, Hindu Students Associations. What events will they do? Diwali night they have with Bollywood performances. Garba night they'll do and everyone shows up. After drinking, they do Garba. That's what college kids do, by the way. And then Holi at the end of the year. Those are the 3 events. You call someone for a study group or some kind of Durga Puja or something, actually, no one wants to do that. But when it comes to these fun things, oh, we're going to bounce around. Everyone shows up for that. In doing these small things, then, I am a strong Hindu is what comes out. It's not the kids feeling that they're strong Hindus. Their parents are the ones saying, oh, look how great of a Hindu my kid is. He plays dandiya in October. They throw holy colors in April. And my kid doesn't even drink before dandiya. He's even much better than the rest of them. That's where we've fallen. So these externalities then, they are essential in their own way. That we have our Garba event here every year. Because the objection is, Haribhai, you have Garba event at mission, you're saying this, you're a hypocrite. Hear me out here. In my mind, if a kid comes to our Garba event with his friends and sees that, wow, this is a social gathering that we have, we're having fun, everyone's invested, even the brahmacharis trying to dance, everything's going on, then maybe let me come for a workshop. Workshop, well, maybe come for Bal Vihar. Come for Bal Vihar, before you know it, they're deeper ingrained. So these have purposes within them, that celebratory thing. When we take this externality as the very religion, focusing on that solely as my practice, I've fallen away at that point. And to your point that you made, yeah, that's the problem that we find ourselves in. So Gurudev says looking at these externalities as the main focus then makes us lose our way. Now at this point he pauses and he makes some more points. These are not necessarily problems that he's giving. He's giving an outlook for how to rectify these situations now. Guruji's favorite line that he used to say in meetings, board meetings especially, right? When people come with so many different objections all the time, Swami Tejamananji used to say, objections are always welcome. Granted that, you have a solution. Don't just come in here and complain and say, this is wrong, that is wrong. What does that do for anyone? Come with a solution of maybe we can try this to fix the problem that actually has some traction. And Gurudev follows that exactly here, where one of his first remedies that he's saying is, first thing he prefaces it with is, I'm not here to propose anything new, is what he says. Why is that significant? So many so-called gurus nowadays, who, just like Sonu Nigam came to Dallas last week, the gurus also tour America during the summertime. They also go on concert tours like this, giving lectures, things like that. So many of these gurus, in the name of Hinduism, say the most outlandish things in their satsangs. New types of meditation and yoga, new types of mantras they create on their own, new ways of doing different sadhana. There is nothing new in Hinduism. Anything that is our base and our foundation is already contained in Shastra, and in Srimad Bhagavad Gita we see tapasya is that different kinds of austerities we take to build our shraddha and maintain control over ourselves. If that tapas is not ordained by Shastra, don't do it then. Fasting for 6 out of 7 days of the week. Monday for Surya Bhagavan, I can't eat. Tuesday, Hanumanji, who's going to eat on Tuesday? No, you can't do that. Wednesday for Devi, of course, you can't eat that day. Thursday for Guru. What will Guru think if you eat that day? Upvas that day also. Friday again for a different form of Devi. Then Saturday, just because. 6 out of 7 times you do Upvas, your body is just going to disintegrate on the spot. So tapasya, that's ghora tapasya like that, not ordained by Shastra. But these new things that people do in the name of Hinduism hurts our practice that way. Now, Pujya Gurudev makes an awesome distinction in one of his interviews. I suggest you watch it. It's on the Chick India channel on YouTube. He did an interview once in Australia in 1984 at Beacon University. And he was interviewed by 3 luminaries in their fields, 3 professors in the field of religion. 40-minute interview. It starts out super contentious, where they're just saying your religion is superstitious, your religion is non-essential, your religion is redundant, unnecessary. They're saying all these things to him. In the beginning, he starts by explaining what Hinduism is. Doesn't get defensive. Explains what it is. By the middle of the interview, he's won them over. They're laughing with him, they're joking, and they're seeing what he's saying as it should be seen. That's a skill that Gurudev was masterful at, that kind of a conversation. So in there, one of the first questions is, your religion is ancient, thousands and thousands of years old. Is it still relevant for the modern person today? If not, because he's already assuming, he's saying it's not relevant, therefore, in which ways does it need to evolve, is his question. Loaded question like that. Some questions when they're loaded, it's hard to get out of them. When did you start beating your dog? When someone asks something like that, they're already assuming something there, and then they're asking. Your religion is already out of touch. What will you do to fix it? You know? We ask politicians these kind of questions. So Gurudev starts by saying, religion at all times, if it's a true religion like Hinduism, does not need an evolution, it needs an upgrade. What's the subtle point here? He explains. Evolution refers to something undergoing change to improve. Evolution of a personality. Before, I was lazy, I was ignorant, I was foolish, I was arrogant. Over time, I become more knowledgeable, more open to people, more accepting. Evolution of my personality. Scientifically, if we look at Darwin's theory of evolution, different kinds of traits that different animals accrued over time in species, that was to improve, to adapt to the world that they live in. Improvement over time. If you're saying Hinduism has to evolve, then you're saying it has to undergo change to go from defective to effective. He's saying that's not the case. Sanatana Dharma needs an upgrade from time to time, meaning those points that need to be highlighted for that day and age from the Shastra, that needs to be done. And he gives examples in his interview. Bhagavan Vedavyasji. At his time, interest in the Vedas was waning. He saw that memory power was not what it once was. Interest was not what it once was. Therefore, let me codify the Veda into 4 different sections, each having a complete teaching in there so it can be passed down through lineages so it stays intact. Without Bhagavan Shri Vedavyasji, there is no Sanatana Dharma today. Centuries later, Bhagavan Shri Adi Shankaracharyaji. Seeing at that time, people were so smitten by rituals that gave them certain things. Rituals for us means Satyanarayana Puja and Katha afterwards. I'm talking rituals in that day and age which were popular, where if you have a drought in your village, and this is still in effect today, if you have a drought in your village in the summer, you do a certain yaga the right way, with the right mantra, yantra, tantra, everything, you will have rain that night. Guaranteed it will still happen. So there were rituals they were doing that guarantees them a place in Svarga in the next life. Therefore, who cares about this Upanishadic teaching about I am Brahman and everything? I'm guaranteed Svarga next life. First class ticket. Why would I give that up? Therefore, rituals were seen as the highest. In Buddhism, the Bauddha ideology, which had been corrupted from what Sanatana Dharma said was spreading, he logically battled that and established the supremacy of Advaita Vedanta over everything else. So upgrade. He didn't do anything new. Those parts of Shastra that were neglected, he simply highlighted that. Again, what is he doing here? Upgrading the religion. And without Bhagavan Sri Shankaracharyaji, there is no Hinduism today. You go further. Swami Vivekananda. Vivekananda came to America in 1893 for the first time. Parliament of Religions in Chicago. At that time, Hinduism was seen as this exotic, mystical, superstitious. That's how they saw it around the world. He gave an intellectual muscle to Hinduism, saying it's not simply based on snake charmers and all these things you guys talk about in the West. It has some intellectual dum behind it. That's what makes it a strong religion. Without Swami Vivekananda, Hinduism as seen by the West would not be the same. And then I'll throw Gurudev into that mix as well. To teach people, regardless of their background, regardless of religious affiliation, to do it in a way at our level, in the language that we speak, in our parlance, making us rise to the heights of his intellect. Without Pujya Gurudev, Hinduism would not be what it is today, as accessible. Yes?
So, what do you define? Some of the bad practices are coming, right? So, getting rid of those bad practices, is it evolution or upgrade?
Getting rid of those has to be an upgrade.
Karma-kind or animal sacrifice.
So animal sacrifice, that specifically has a place for certain rituals, for certain reasons. It's not a frivolous decapitation of animals. There is a spot in that for certain rituals. But for other things that are seen as frivolous and not really having any meaning in tapasya that's not required, The upgrade there, just like Shankaracharya ji eradicated wrong notions that this is the way has to be eradicated. Like there are some gurus that say, if you buy a house within 1 mile of the temple that I built, you're guaranteed moksha. So people buy that area there, and then they're always there to do seva at the temple. Or they say, if you donate a certain amount of money to me every year, you're guaranteed moksha. There are gurus that say this within the Hindu pantheon. It infuriates me to no end, but it's there. It's like the televangelists in the 80s, right? Where they would demand all this money so that your family gets saved. They'd spend that on private jets and stuff. That's happening with some so-called Hindu gurus nowadays. So the upgrade necessary is to show that that's not the truth. Look at what Shastra is saying, and then going from there. So not anything new, and so this is where I need your input here again. I'm going to put that in purple here. How do we convey to our Bhavivihar kids that Shastra is where we have to look, not some new age fad of what progress in religion is? What are your thoughts? Actual texts are in Sanskritam. And then English translations, it's hard for me to get a grasp of that also when I'm in middle school and high school even.
So relate whatever happening with Shastra, where it is mentioned in Shastra. So that relationship, that connection.
So relation of life to Shastra then. Because the example I gave you starting out earlier was about embryonic development in Bhagavatam. I talk sometimes about how Sanjaya saw the 7 continents when it came to Mahabharata. Seeing all of these things, when a student feels Hinduism is opposed to science, Hinduism is far ahead, science catches up. And in our religion, it's not that there's a separation of science and religion. Science is ingrained in all the Shastra. That's a double-edged sword, however. In some ways, it shows that the religion is purely scientific. In other ways, when religion is taken out of the education system, like it has been around the world, they take out the Hindu Shastras from there. Science is contained in there. When that's effectively removed, it's seen as there's a culture without any scientific development. Everything is couched in those religious texts, which are superstitious anyway. Yes, sir?
You know, one of the interesting things that I've taken up in my class is whether or not all technology represents progress. And so, for example, air conditioning, freon, all of that is actually one of the biggest drivers of climate change. If you go back to our Shastra, the top 4 reasons for climate change are this like air conditioning, refrigerant, under-education of women. 3rd is food waste. 4th is vegetarianism. It's kind of like big words. If we had followed like a Vedantic, like our civilizational consciousness had driven that technical progress versus Western philosophy, we'd be in a different place. And I believe that we hold a lot of the, like almost the correctors for the next 100 years, because we saw what this era of dominion actually means in terms of plundering the world. And now it's going to take Sanatana Dharma in order to fix it. So, I mean, these are the ways in which I'm kind of relating it to.
With so-called individual comfort, then, is no surefire sign of progress. That's what we've taken it as in here. Yes, sir?
The key things or the key discoveries or things which have already been documented in our Shastra, I think we can simplify them to students so that they understand that, so that they know that these are already things which are there in our civilization much before the Western world discovered. For example, Arthashastra or
Mm-hmm. Chanakya Niti and everything. Aryabhatta's. That has to be in a tactful way, though. And I'm glad you said that. There's a subtle point to be made here. Recently, about 2 years ago, IIT Kanpur released a calendar on Indian knowledge systems, where they had all these different types of Indian sciences. Arthashastra was included, Aryabhatta's thing was there, economics, all of these different fields, science, physics, all of that. For every single one of these, Mark Twain had a quote on Arthashastra saying it's the most evolved social structure ever known to man. There was Oppenheimer even had a quote, of course, about what he thought of Hinduism. There are several other scientists. Einstein also had a quote on Indian physics as well. That was given. Now this was passed, WhatsApp University shared it everywhere. All my family members bombarded me with it. Knowing that I'm in this field, anytime they see something like this, it's, oh yeah, let's send it to this guy. So I got it 10 times in one day. When I saw it though, I was disappointed in what I saw. For every one of these knowledge systems, it has to be a Western person in that field who says it's good. Therefore, I value my religion when the white guy says it's good. When the brahmachari says, dude, read Bhagavatam, read Mahabharata, no, it doesn't matter. When the white scientist says it's good, then I value it. This is colonial hangover. We're still dealing with it. So people love this calendar and everything, and people are saying, display it at your mission. I said, hell no, I'm not displaying it at my mission. Have the quotes from our Shastra saying what it is, then I'll display it, not for any other reason. So very good point. And the subtlety there is, do we see it from a colonial hangover standpoint, or what is the genesis of our pride in our own religion? That has to be seen. So Gurudev makes that point there. Yes. Put the onus on them to go further into these things. Personal research will do so much more than just being told in the classroom. Very good point. Let me add that here. Encouraging personal research. Now, what's the next point that Gurudev makes here? He says as part of that upgrade process, and this is straight from the essay, by the way. If you go through the essay, point by point, I'm taking it. One other point he makes is, new methods of teaching. This knowledge to be passed on effectively needs new methods to be taught. And we're seeing that that's the way to reach out. If you look at a plug here, September 15th is our first in-person high school hangout of this school year at Chinmaya Saket. Now, what we're going to talk about is tuning into the personality, introspection, and reflection. I could give a lecture on this. Just like you all fall asleep, the high schoolers will also fall asleep. They'll look at their phones first and then they'll fall asleep if I do that. Instead, what are Divyaji and I doing? We're doing a musical analysis using the lyrics of Taylor Swift and Kendrick Lamar. That's going to be our workshop. So the chicks here, we'd love to have you involved in that. It's going to be a fun thing to do. That sparks interest then. When we announced it today and we said those two names are how we're exploring this, kids were like, oh my God. First of all, it was like, he knows who Kendrick Lamar is. He's a brahmachari. That's the first thing. Second thing is, wow, that's interesting and kind of weird. Now, to the outside, if there's a purist, someone who's been in the mission a long time, they've said to me, I've gotten some calls saying, Hari, what is this, man? You're teaching Shastra, you're a brahmachari, what is this, teaching rap music and stuff, what's wrong with you? I make it very clear. I said, through this workshop, I'm not saying that Taylor Swift and Kendrick Lamar are Vedantins, and that what they're saying is Vedanta. That's not what I'm saying. I'm saying to properly understand this knowledge, introspection into my personality is a requirement. Through these people's song lyrics, for years now, they inquire into their personalities and see how they've changed over time. That capacity I want to show the kids. Because I can tell them, journal, write in your journal every day. I can say that, showing how over a sustained time, people express their thoughts in a poetic way to deeper understand their own insecurities. That's what I want to give to the high schoolers. So that exploration is needed. That's a new teaching method. So in your opinions then now, what are some new teaching methods? This is the most exciting part of the whole workshop, where I get to hear this. What do you think are new ways?
One example I will give right now, there is a lot of buzz about Chandrayaan, right?
Yes.
So the way Modi named this Shiv Shakti, that started the whole discussion about why Shiv Shakti. And at least in my house, right? They said, okay, who does Lord Shiva carry? He's the moon, right? What's the significance of that? So connecting those current events with the historical background
Yes.
also gets them connected. So now my kids started doing Google, where it is mentioned, what is the significance of moon in our Shastra and all. So I think those relating them, connecting with the new methods as well as current events.
Which that specifically also needs a subtle tact, because Hinduism today is seen as extremist, and you hear the H word, Hindutva, being used in all different ways. So when we explain these things as necessary current events, with that context of what Sanatana Dharma really is, definitely. Anything else from this side?
Especially when the kids are going from a middle school age into the high school, that's when the maturity starts to come back, and trying to help them relate with their day-to-day activities, and then how they process their thoughts, coming to connect it with our shastras and helping them. I think that will be the right time and bring the right knowledge.
Because what was seen in that essay was, it's redundant and unnecessary. Like Amma said, like Uma said, when we connect it to day-to-day life, that gives it that relevance that's needed. Now, when it comes to that relevance then, because let's go back to the institutions that we talked about at teachers training. So there's the educational institution, where the kids spend the most amount of time. Next is the family institution. Third is here in the spiritual institution. The intelligentsia not liking their own religion, that's the result of the educational institution. Proxy view of Hinduism. Seeing the non-essential as essential. Superstition, these are failings by the family institution in many ways. Not blaming any families here, I'm saying as a whole, family institution is responsible for that. These solutions that are coming up now is on you and me as the spiritual institution, very clearly. So spiritual institution needs an outsized relevance in their lives. Now what's the problem we come into then? In Mumbai, the people work like crazy hours, right? So you ask a kid, like, show me your parents, and he's like, my parents? Oh, you mean Sunday wale papa? That's what he says, because he only sees them on Sunday. And for the dad, you ask him, how tall is your kid? What does he do? He goes like this, and then he goes like this. He only sees him horizontal. When he leaves for work, the kid's asleep. When he comes back, the kid's asleep. Goes like this and like that. Similarly then, if you say, talk about Hinduism, the kid says, oh, you mean Sunday wale Hinduism? Meaning it's only confined to that 1 hour on a Sunday, we failed. What we do here can be beautiful and amazing and enlightening and inspiring, but if it doesn't extend beyond these 4 walls here, what relevance do we have? The day-to-day relevance is completely missing. That bridge between spiritual institution, family institution has to be there. Therefore, the class updates. Therefore, keeping the family in the loop, completely necessary. So day-to-day, very important. What else? New methods of teaching.
Probably not new, but having that concepts really practice at home. And also, when we had a holiday system, instead of going to Niagara Falls, we used to go somewhere, so like you're in India, like so somewhere, they can relate to what it really is. They can actually see the sport.
Home practice and exposure. And if we say parents are only going to Niagara Falls, nowhere like that, we can have yatras that we facilitate taking these kids to those places when they're in high school and college. Amit Bhaiya.
Just something that came to mind when I'm trying to teach my son something at home, and I explain it, and it seems to get across, and I don't see the action afterwards. And it seems simple, that I realize what kind of medium what kind of medium influences him the most, and it's visual, it's video,
Yeah.
shorts, and so if I find something on YouTube, and thankfully as much bad stuff is out there, there's also good stuff out there. If he watches it there, it seems to sink in a little bit. And it seems to open up more discussion than if we do something together. He watches it, what do you think about that? All of a sudden the discussion starts much with more attention. And it has a dual effect going back to the research aspect, that if they research on their own account, the algorithm starts spitting that stuff back again instead of the stuff that they don't want to watch, which is inclined to watch, just joke stuff, the videos, that keeps coming. So the hope is that it starts to even change the algorithm.
Yes.
On the YouTube side or the video side.
So the multimedia that we use and the way we come in that way, that's utterly important. One thing I always like, what ifs, right? One what if that I love is, what if Gurudev were around during the rise of social media? How would he have leveraged it? Because right now, yeah, Chinmay channels there, all these things are there, we're doing good. But I always wonder, if he were there and social media was around at that time, what would he have done to make sure to reach out to young minds? Ashwin Bhaiya.
So, 2 things. So first of all, I do think that there is still a good place for reading. So, like, one thing that I've been obsessed with, and I think I messaged everybody that listens to me, there's like this book series by Rick Riordan. It's read by middle schoolers and high schoolers, and like everybody has it. I'm like, what is library, to have these books actually bought and purchased and put there. Because otherwise you just find Wendy Doniger and all these other random useless Hindus all their literature there. The second thing is, I have to make an admission because I was being subordinate to Swamiji last year. We really bad things to be clear publicly. But my kids were asking for meditation like guidance. And I found something from a teacher that I highly respect, and they're like 3 to 5 minute kind of like guidance clips. But I was told to post like these 47-minute, like 8-piece series things for kids, and I was like, I don't think that the youth are going to engage with that. I do think that if we want to keep things within the mission, we have the responsibility then to actually create the content for that in terms of short form. Because my kids are not, and I don't think anybody's kids are going to watch, like a 350 minutes session. They just want quick hits, sit down 3 minutes, I'm feeling stressed out, and lack of balance is one of my frustrated with it, from the stress around college applications. Yeah. They just want something that's short form. And I think we can do a lot in terms of pushing books into our libraries and into our schools. And then also secondly, I think we need to be educating teachers at the schools about what Hinduism actually is. So I think we need like an ambassador program almost, where it's like, hey, like we're going to teach you about what 80% of your kids are Hindu. Why don't we tell you about the basics of Hinduism? Because you don't like, I think that's valuable for teachers that are predominantly white. And then the third thing I would say is that we need a lot more short form content.
So on the same topic, I wanted to ask a question. Isn't our religion too lenient? Like sab chalta hai, yeah, even if anyone says anything bad,
it's not that the religion is not lenient. Our understanding of the religion as being lenient is the problem. Where we say, are there rights and wrongs, do's and don'ts in Hinduism, are they there, like commandments? 70% of Hindus will tell you, even at the mission, there are no do's and don'ts. Jo chahe kar lo. That's what we think. There are do's and don'ts. Not in the way of, thou shalt not do this. That's not how it's presented. If you don't do this, this is the marga you follow after death. This is a painful process. That's clearly given that way, which is the way of saying don't do that. So they are there, but we throw that out, that's Dharma Shastra, that's not relevant. We find excuses, but this idea of thinking it's so lenient, that is the issue. Amit Bhaiya.
I was going to say the short form concept really is important. I think it connects with habit training. And sometimes we get, at least I used to think like you have to spend hours and hours and hours to do something. It always fails if you're not devoted or to develop some interest in something that might be a little hard at first. If you're just doing 10 minutes a day, 5 minutes a day, 15 minutes a day as a class or as a group, and everybody motivates everyone. Everyone can find 15 minutes. I tell my son, everyone, you can find 15 minutes. You sit on the toilet with your phone longer than 15 minutes a day. So you can find 15 minutes to do whatever it is the class wants to do, and then potentially have that feedback either on the WhatsApp chat, like who did the 15 minutes, like I'm on this other thing for Lakshmi and Sadhana, and there's a thing that comes out and everyone just says, did you do it? And you just click the little survey button on it, and you can see the numbers go up. That back and forth interaction within the week might engage people even for a little brief moment.
True.
And then you can grow that over
So that brings the day-to-day, how that constant habitual thing, not in an encroaching way of this is so much, but small doses regularly over time, that makes a deep impression. That's what samskaras are built on. Now the final point he makes in this actually then is, the thing that's needed the most to make all of this happen is mutual support. What I take this to mean is, from the spiritual institution standpoint, it's not just me decreeing that this is our new thing, this is what we have to do. I need buy-in. That's the only way it works. Civilizational topics. Several teachers were like, this makes me uncomfortable, I'm not going to teach it. Okay? That's your opinion, but we've explained why it's necessary, the steps as to why these topics are there, why we're offering training to understand these things. That's all been given. Be open-minded in that way. But mutual support, what it further means to me is a session like this. We're in a workshop environment. I could have just sat up there and talked the whole time. That's not beneficial for me or you. when I get feedback on how it's going, what you all think of this vision, how to implement it going forward, that's what makes that difference for all of us to get better. Which is why, in this format then, you all were hearing each other's questions and answers, and we all benefited. The poor people at Saket, the teachers there, all they heard was silence. They see me staring stupidly into the audience, and then silence because people are asking questions and giving answers, which is why this teacher satsang from now on won't be live streamed to the other center. It'll be on YouTube, but not live streamed to Saket, or here when I'm at Saket. You'll have group discussions when I'm at the other center. So Saket teachers apologized for you having to see me stare out into space for minutes at a time, but starting next time we meet, it'll be group discussion here, where I'll assign facilitators that rotate each month or so. I'll give questions, exercises based on the workshops that we do, and that's how it'll be. So I want this to be interactive in that way, and I think you guys like that better also. Now, last point I want to come to before some administrative thing is the final point Gurudev makes, because you notice this circle is empty right here. He says for all of this to happen, to have that respect and understand the relevance of our culture and religion, what's important then? He says the most important is respect and reverence for our distinct national culture. Respect and reverence for our distinct national culture. What's meant by that? You look at the title of what we learned in 7th grade, Mahabharata. Mahabharata is a historical text. If you don't even look at it as a religious thing, if I don't believe in Hinduism, it's a historical text. It is our history of what happened to the people of Bharata. And for people nowadays that say there was no such thing as Bharata, the British came in and consolidated, that's what became Bharata. Was it called individual kingdoms? Is that the name of the text? Well, Bharata was there. It was in existence. So this distinct national culture then, it doesn't mean the national culture of today, of what we've devolved into, of seeing Hinduism as a certain way, or the NRI view of Hinduism. That's not the distinct culture we're talking about. At the same time, we're not going to some Halcyon era of this is how things were great, this is when the Vedas were actually respected. That's not it either. The ethos of what the culture is, how it relates to people's daily lives, what is dharma in its true understanding, that is that distinct national culture. And to have respect and reverence for that is the only way we grow. Where we see religion as something apart from society, apart from how we do everything, never gets us there. But in every action, how I raise my kids, what do we consume when we eat, what media do we consume, how do I vote, all of these things from a Hindu standpoint then, that is that distinct national culture that I have a respect and reverence for. So in summary then, one thing I want to impress on you is, all of this that we got to discuss today, we only covered 3 paragraphs in this first essay. All of this discussion we had on 3 paragraphs. My goal is not to slog through and finish an essay a week. That's not what I'm about. Gurudev's writing is so deep, so dynamic, 1 paragraph even, we can discuss for weeks if we wanted to. Fall in love with his writing. Get the book As I Think. Read it on your own time as well. The impact that it has, I'm telling you, is amazing. Understanding that vision for this 1 year is what I want, really, for all of our teachers. Through these discussions is how we get there. Now, something administrative. C2 teachers, raise your hands. Good to turn out, good. For the C2 sessions and the S2 sessions, so I'm also addressing Saket here, C2 and S2, we've seen that attendance numbers for some classes, the enrollment numbers, are a bit lower. Many of the grade levels have only 2 or 3 students. Now, that's not to say that a good class can't be run that way. It makes it a lot more difficult, though, on the students and the teachers, where disinterested sometimes, or just seeing that no one's coming. How do we rectify that situation? If we were to combine classes, that would be good. There'd be more kids in the class, but then 4 teachers teaching 8 kids, you'd be fighting for speaking time then. It would be like a presidential primary debate, what it would be like, you know. Hey, my 2 minutes, hey, that's how it would be. That's not fair either to the kids or me as the brahmachari, because I have to deal with the fallout of that. So our solution is, for these classes that have lower numbers then, for the first half an hour, it'll be just that class going through your syllabus and lesson plan for that grade level. For the second half of class, the last 30 minutes, every week you'll combine with the other grade that we designate. There, I'll provide you workshops that you can do that caters to kids of both classes, and then you do those there. So more on that coming up about the specifics of which grade level is getting together, what's to be taught. We're going to be generating and creating all of that, but we'll get that to you at the right time. But this is the format going forward. Because at the end of the day, we don't want a situation where the kids have been coming to Balavihar for several years, and then they suddenly find that, look, my class is tiny, it's just me and one other guy, and when he has a tennis tournament, it's just me staring at two teachers. That's not fair to the kid or the teachers. Especially at the high school level, we need scope for group discussion, which means there has to be a group there to have that discussion, right? So for that reason, we're facilitating it this way. This only applies to C2 and S2. So Chitragut session 2 here, Saket session 2 there. Is there any part of that I need to add anything to? Am I missing anything there?
By next class, you will have the plan for
Yeah.
which grades are being.
Yes, and I'm glad to say that because we have a week break before next class. So next class sounds so soon, but it gives me a good buffer. I love the way that's phrased. Thank you so much. So,
One more thing, just for C2 teachers. So there are some empty slots for class presentations as well. So we will consolidate that, and we might be having 2 times the grades going on stage for here for just C2 and S2 if you want to announce.
so for C2 and for S2, I'm looking at the camera at the S2 people, looking into your eyeballs right now. For all 20 of them or 5 of them sitting there, who knows right now really. So for C2 and S2 then, this opens up more spots for class presentations. We have a plan for filling those as well. We'll get to you on that. And you may have to do more than 1 class performance. 2 opportunities you get. No harm done there. So with that, we conclude Teacher Satsang for today. Thank you so much for coming. And to the Saket people, you don't have to watch me stare into space any longer in Teacher Satsangs. You'll have discussions when I'm here, and same thing for Chitragut when I'm there. So thank you so much for participating. Let's learn his vision this year. Let's get deeper into it. Let's collaborate on how to implement it and become stronger together. Om Shanti 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 Hari Om Shri Guru Pyo Namaha Hari Om.